to this computer. And you can hear me okay, right?
I can hear you very well, thanks, Bob. Can you hear me?
Beautifully. Yep, you're
Great,
fine.
great.
George Ellis, you are known to many in Sydney and nationally as a musician and more specifically a conductor. You've led orchestras at the Olympics in 2000, at football contests like the NRL Grand Final in Brisbane. You've held that wand high in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, Auckland, New Zealand. You've even conducted a live concert for Queen Elizabeth. When you look back over your career, is there a particular highlight?
That's a very good question. I have two answers to that. One is it's hard to go past the opening ceremony of the Sydney Olympic Games with the Sydney Symphony Orchestra and a 200-piece choir called the Millennium Choir, and in front of 120,000 people and apparently a few billion watching on TV. That was a particular highlight, a career highlight. I've loved everything I've done, but I do remember telling myself that night as I was standing just outside the dressing room, waiting to go onto the stage at the Olympic Stadium in Sydney on the 15th of September 2000. 7:59 p.m. I remember it like it was today. Um, and I remember saying to myself, I was only 36, but I thought I'd had a lifetime of work behind me, which I hadn't. I wasn't even halfway through my career yet. Um, I remember saying to myself, remember this night forever. You've worked to get to somewhere like this that you could only dream of before, and now it was a reality. So I remember saying to myself, remember this night forever. Remember this moment. Remember this feeling, because this is a beautiful thing that's happened to me in my career and in my life. And I'm glad I said those words to me because they've proven to be accurate, and that is, I remember it very much, and I remember it very closely. The second answer is not nearly as exotic as that, or as international as that, let's say, and that is, for a few years, about 10 years, I was the um, director of the children's prom concerts at the Sydney Opera House. And the reason I mention that is even though, I mean, sometimes we only play to 30 or 40 children or, a handful of families, because we would do three concerts a day for a week for every season. And, but, sometimes it would only be, as I said, a minimal amount of people in the audience. And it was, even though it was the iconic opera house, it wasn't, in the big concert hall. It was just in one of the little back rooms. And I remember, and I still do children's concerts, but not as much these days, but especially back then, I would often deliberately turn around to the audience and look at the children's faces. Because as a conductor, as you'd know, as everybody would know, Bob, and that is that you've got your back to the audience 99% of the time. The 1% is when you're bowing before and after a piece. The rest of the time, you have no, until you hear applause, you have no idea what the reaction is, whether there's smiles on faces, whether there's distraction, whether they're, reading their phones or something instead. Um, but with the children, I would turn around, and we're talking sometimes 3, 4-year-olds, sometimes older, but especially the 2, 3, 4-year-olds. I would see this look on their face that's hard to describe in words, but one of alacrity, one of elation, one of surprise, one of joy, one of satisfaction, and that gave me no end. And when I think about career highlights, as you've asked so beautifully about, is that a highlight for me is every time I turn around and we're playing a piece of Mozart, or it could be, a pop song by Dire Straits or the Police, or Fleetwood Mac that I've orchestrated, and I've turned around and I see huge smiles on children's faces, and they're hearing a symphony orchestra for the first time in their life. And that's something very special. And at the end of each rehearsal for a symphony orchestra concert for children, I say to the orchestra, please remember, this is your maybe 1,000th concert, but for the audience, for many of them, it's their very first concert. So play like it's your very first concert in terms of the excitement and the joy you feel about playing your instrument. So it's a bit of a long-winded answer, Bob, but my career highlight is every time I do a children's concert and the children are loving the sound, the beautiful sound of the musical instruments in the symphony orchestra, no
It's
matter the
fantastic.
style of music.
That's great. George, you conduct like it's your first concert with great energy. Some would use the word flamboyant. Who who inspired you in your style of leading orchestras?
Leonard Bernstein.
Hmm.
Two words, Leonard Bernstein. I've seen a lot of footage of, I never saw him conduct live, unfortunately,
Oh,
but I have seen him on film, on video, on various, lots of footage, a lot. And I just loved the joy on his face when he was conducting a Mahler symphony or a Beethoven symphony or a
or his
Shostakovich,
own
Tchaikovsky, or his
Chichester
own,
Psalms
or
or
absolutely.
West
That's
Side Story.
exactly, as we all know, he was a wonderful composer. I mean, his conducting of his own Candide overture is just something spectacular. It's on YouTube. It's a sight to see. Um, because we know, especially when we work with great, the greater the musicians they are, the more they can do it on their own. So there isn't much we can do in terms of getting them to play it better. But what we can do, and Leonard Bernstein knew this, or Bernstein, I should say, did it beautifully, was to inspire them to play even better than they thought they might be able to. And to bring the joyous climaxes to a huge climax, to bring the big, the soft lows to a very tender, sweet, beautiful, heart-wrenching low. So the highs and the lows, we can bring those out, and nobody did that better than Leonard Bernstein. And when he did go big and large, you used the word flamboyant. There was nobody more flamboyant than him. So he's not a bad person to try and model yourself on, even though there will never be another one like him.
Oh, I don't know. I think you do pretty well. George, if you had to do it over again,
Yeah,
where would you change things in your life? And what would be the results of that change?
that is a very interesting question because I'm tempted to say, and I think it's true, that I wouldn't change a thing because I've absolutely loved all of it. I will say this, that when I was younger, I was doing more classical music, as in everything from Bach and Mozart through to, especially today's classical composers. And in the 20th century, it got quite hard and very, very difficult to conduct. But as well as loving classical music, I did grow up with pop and rock music. I have an older brother, and he used to love the Beatles, and I loved the Beatles because of that. And then, all the subsequent big acts since then, Elton John, and I mentioned Fleetwood Mac before. And I remember thinking to myself, that would be if that music was orchestrated, that would be so much easier to conduct than a really difficult Shostakovich symphony. And then I thought, if only that could happen one day. And now that's basically what I do all the time. Conduct music by the Beatles orchestrated, or Fleetwood Mac orchestrated, or David Bowie orchestrated, or Queen orchestrated. And I love it. And I must say, between you and me and anyone else listening in, that it's actually much easier. It's wonderful to conduct a piece like Eleanor Rigby, which is written for 8 strings and 3 voices, I think. Uh, it's a beautiful piece of music, but it's all in 4/4. It's quite in complex harmonically, but in terms of beating, the tempo of that and the rhythm of that song, it's quite a bit easier. But for me, just as joyous because I grew up with that music. So the short answer is that because I'm now conducting the music that I grew up with a full symphony orchestra, which is a magic combination, I've ended up here. Because of the path I've taken, I wouldn't change a thing. Otherwise, I might not end up here. And I love where I am.
We are a combination, we're an amalgam of all our choices that got us to who we are. You're right. You're
True.
right. In
You're
fact, I've
absolutely
only
right.
known you for about 18 months, and
Yes.
we didn't meet at the Sydney Opera House. We met
No.
on a pickleball court. And I appreciate you're a healthy man who likes to keep fit, but pickleball?
Yes.
What were your biggest fears about playing that new sport, and are those fears long gone?
An ex-partner of mine who used to play tennis and grew up being a state tennis champion here in Sydney was playing, took up pickleball. And I would go and see her play. And I always admired her tennis playing. And then I saw her prowess on the pickleball court. And I thought, wow, that sounds wonderful. And so I live that looks wonderful. I live in the inner west of Sydney. And there's a wonderful club, and which is where I met you, Bob, the Sydney Inner West Pickleball Club. And so I signed up and I paid my membership fees and I took beginner lessons and I started playing for the beginner sessions. And then we get an email, or it might have been a message in our WhatsApp group saying, Bob Mendelsohn is coming to join you. And we said, Bob Mendelsohn, the person that was instrumental in setting up pickleball in Australia, he's coming to see us? What? And he's coming to play with us? That's incredible. And so it was to my huge delight when you joined us that first morning, as you say, a few months ago now. And I, what I remember about that first morning, and I loved it, was that you did two things. You played with us, and you were, competing with us, and hitting winners, and we were learning from you. But then we just wanted to ask you questions. We would say, "So, what should we have done at that point?" And you would give us magical advice, like pretend your feet are, tied with an elastic band, and move up
Mhm.
together, and pearls of wisdom and golden pieces of advice that we took on and we still remember, and we still talk about it. We say we won that point because Bob showed us how to do that. Um, I do love everything about pickleball. I love the sport. I love the game as a game and the technique, etc. But I love the friendships that you form. And I also, as you do say, and thank you for saying that, I do like to stay fit. It's important that I stay fit for my job. Um, Only 2 weekends ago, I had 4 concerts in 2 days, two on Friday, two on the Saturday, a matinee and an evening, and they were 3.5 hour concerts each. And I needed to be fit to get through those. So pickleball really helps me with that. And like if I can, I'll play when I'm available, I play 3 or 4 hours a day. That's how committed I am to it and obsessed I am with it. And it helps me in my fitness. So pickleball is a big part of my life, and I'm so glad that you and I were able to meet on the pickleball
Yeah,
court.
it's great. Maybe they'll add pickleball into the curriculum at the conservatorium.
Oh,
Okay,
why
um,
not?
back to music. Your musical accomplishments include developing and leading the George Ellis Orchestra. How did that take place?
That's a good question. That took place. My own orchestra happened because event producers, especially after the Sydney Olympic Games, event producers would call me to do an event for them, to do the music for an event. It could be, as you mentioned, the Queen coming out, or it could be a rugby league grand final, as you've mentioned. And they would say, "So can we use the Sydney Symphony Orchestra?" And I said, "Well, they're booked till for the next 18 months to 2 years. When is this event?" And they will say it's next month. Oh, well, I'm sorry, we can't get the Sydney Symphony Orchestra or another established orchestra like that within such amount of time. And they would say, "Well, what can we do?" And I said, "Well, I can put an orchestra together for you."
Hmm.
This was 15 or so years ago. I said, I've got great colleagues who I've studied with at the conservatorium. They're all conservatorium graduates. If you want 80 people, I can get you 80 orchestral musicians and put a symphony orchestra together for you for this particular event. And they would say, fantastic. What's the orchestra called? And I said, it doesn't have a name. It's just a group of musicians. This is at first. And so the producers would say to me, can we just use your name, the orchestra conducted by George Ellis? And that eventually morphed to the George Ellis Orchestra. So I thought, okay, I've got a thing here. Why don't I formalize it and make it a legitimate, organization, which I've done. So our company now is the George Ellis Orchestra. So that's how that.
Necessity is the mother of invention, hey?
Exactly right.
George, you play cello, and I'm guessing many other instruments. If you had any spare time, which is very limited in your world, what songs play in your head? That is, would you grab a cello or a piano bench or sing a cappella? What song is it in there just now?
You know, it's interesting that as much as I love other people's music and music written by, the famous composers and the great pop and rock artists over the uh, usually I think of their music when I'm actually performing their music or playing a CD or listening to Spotify or something and I hear their music. But another thing that I do as well as conduct orchestras is I compose for them. And there's sometimes a project like a film score. I've just written a film score earlier this year, which is coming out in a couple of months. But even if there isn't a project in mind, and I've done this from from when I was a very small child, and that is tunes come into my head. So unless I'm in, say, a dialogue like I am right now, or I'm otherwise occupied, like watching a movie or playing pickleball, if I'm just, walking down the street and just thinking about things, what the music that I do here are new pieces of music. Just, I'm just constantly coming up with new tunes. And often, when I come home, if a tune isn't that good, I would have forgotten it. But if it's something that's stuck with me, especially if it's been an hour or two, or if I've been out and gone to a party or something, and coming back home and driving, and I don't have the radio on, tunes will stay in my head. And then if I get home, or when I get home, and if that same tune is in my head, I write it down for safekeeping so I can use it for a project that might come up. So in answer to your question, and it sounds very egotistic, I know, I hear my own music in my head, music that I haven't heard before. It's interesting. You probably know the story of Paul McCartney waking up one day and singing a tune that went da 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 da. And he went to the piano and he started playing it. And he said, "What's this song?" And he asked John Lennon. John Lennon said, "I don't know." And he asked George Martin. George Martin said, "I don't know what this song is." And Paul McCartney said, "Oh, I must have written it." And that became the song yesterday. So not that I can compose nearly as well as or write songs like Paul McCartney, but I do think of my own new songs or new melodies in my own head.
I love it. Hey, where were you born and raised?
I was born in Sydney, Australia. My parents were Greek. They grew up in Alexandria, Egypt, when there was a large Greek community there, large Greek population. And they came out to Australia in 1956. And my brothers and I were born in in Sydney, in a western suburb of Sydney called Penrith, which is back then about an hour and a half west of Sydney. But then when I was 3, we moved to the inner west suburb of Marrickville in Sydney, very close to the city. And I've lived in the inner west since.
That's home. George, what gets you up each morning? That is, you've got such a long resume of superb achievements, and many would, rest on those laurels, but you keep going. So, what keeps you going? What gets you up each morning?
Life in general, I love life. Life is a beautiful thing. I love everything about it. I love friendships. I love my children. I've got a grandchild who I adore. I have a lovely partner that I've been seeing for a few months now. May is a lovely woman who I've met only fairly recently, but that's going very nicely. We go to the beach together. We stand up paddleboard together. All these things, in answer to your question, get me up in the morning. They're all wonderful and positive things. Music, music gets me up in the morning. The fact that I'm allowed to perform it and asked to perform it, and I'm doing a concert tour to New Zealand in August this year. I'm so looking forward to that. All of those things make life a joy for me. In fact, I often don't sleep all that much because, sometimes when my eyes open at 4:30 or 5 in the morning, rather than go back to sleep, I go, I have so much to do today, not in terms of time pressure, but like, let me at it. I can't wait to get it. I don't want to orchestrate at 9 o'clock. I want to orchestrate at 7 o'clock. So all of these things get me up, and I think life is beautiful. So life in general, and my relationships within life make me love life
That's
and
great.
want to get up in the morning.
I have seven grandchildren, so I know that joy of that little one. Um,
Isn't it the best?
oh, I mean, I'm glad I have children. Um, the world, the world we have, the world we know is a very different world than the way your parents grew up and moved in 56. The world is ever changing, they say. They say it's the only constant. But what particularly worries you about changes you see in the world just now?
The conflicts bother me. They always have. I don't know if it's worse now than before. It seems that way, but they've always been bad. Ever since I was little, we knew about Vietnam. We knew about. I mean, I wasn't alive, of course, for the Second World War or the Korean War, but ever since then, any conflict, the Middle East, the Gulf War, the Iraq, the weapons of mass destruction, all of that, the terrorist acts that have happened across the years over different places, that's not good. And the current conflicts, we all know what they are: Russia and Ukraine, Iran, etc. They get me down, I must admit. That worries me. I hope they play out the way that other wars have, and that is they're over and there aren't too many casualties. But even one casualty to me is way too many, and there are of course many more than one casualty. So that's a concern. I hope it doesn't escalate even more than's already there. But human nature seems, at least for some people, conflict is the way to go. But I wish that wasn't the case.
Let's see what we can do to make it better. All right, here's the
Great.
lightning round. Here we go. Just give me just a quick answer. You don't have to give me a
Sure.
paragraph.
Okay.
Coca-Cola or Pepsi?
I haven't drunk either. I think maybe Coke. I think maybe Coke is okay. I don't know. It's a bigger brand, so maybe it's the best. So sorry, I don't have a good answer for you for that
It's the
one.
real thing. All right. Shostakovich or John Williams?
Just a Coke.
Mendelssohn or Bach?
Ooh, Bach, because there wouldn't be Mendelsohn without Bach.
And there wouldn't be a Bach without Mendelssohn, but that's another story. Uh,
I got it. I got
that's all right.
it.
Tennis or pickleball?
Pickleball.
Of course. Sydney or Melbourne?
Sydney for the beaches, Melbourne for its restaurant, cafe, live music culture.
We'll have to take you to some good restaurants in Sydney. All right.
There are that too.
Troy Cassar-Daley or Slim Dusty?
Australian country music owes everything to Slim Dusty. But having met Troy Cassar-Daley and having worked with him, and I'm doing a concert with him again in January next year, I have to say, my good mate Troy Cassar-Daley, he's a
Okay.
wonderful, beautiful man with a daughter, Gem Cassar-Daley, who's got a superb voice as well.
Well, we'll have to make sure he listens to this podcast. All right. And finally, Old Testament or New Testament?
New Testament. Jesus Christ made everything in the Old Testament valid.
Hmm, beautiful. Is there anything else? I always like to give my guests an opportunity to say anything that we haven't covered that you wish I would have asked to the
I would
Bob's
just
Your
add
Uncle podcast.
I would just add that we miss you here in Australia, and we hope to come. We hope you come back soon because you teach us so much about pickleball, but you also teach us about life and how to be a genuinely good human. And the world needs that. We need that. And please hurry back when you can come back to Sydney, Australia for us,
Yes, sir.
please.
Middle of August, I'm on the plane again. I will be back for my
Wonderful.
6 month. I'm an international snowbird. So spring,
Yes. Yes.
summer, I'm
Yeah.
wherever that is. It's a
Wonderful.
joy.
Well, we can't wait for August to come around then, and we'll greet you with open arms.
George, you're a blessing. Thanks so much and have a great rest of winter. And I especially look forward to hearing good things about your August tour in New Zealand.
Look forward to it. Thank you so much for having me on and those wonderfully astute questions. I wish I could speak more eloquently, but I thank you for the opportunity to answer.
My audience will love you. Thanks so much, George.
Thanks, Bob. Have a great